Well, Darrell, it's good to be together. It's been a while since you and I have hung out recently, like 10 minutes ago.
Yes.
And lots of times since, but this is at least a year since you've been on the C-Slam podcast. Wow. So welcome back.
Thank you.
Tell me about the last year.
It's always good to be with you. Always.
Tell me about, for those listening, what's been meaningful since we last chatted on this podcast.
Wow. You want me to summarize a year?
Yeah.
I would think that the most meaningful thing is the amount of time I've had with grandkids.
Oh, amazing.
Our summer was just packed. We thought we had it kind of planned out, and then all discover, we don't have babysitting. Can you take the kids for a week? And that sort of thing. But I've been able to have really rich conversations about the Lord with my grandkids.
Such a gift.
I'm a happy camper.
Such a gift. And there's a bit of a milestone in Sharon's life.
Very good. That's right. Sharon retired after 18 years of running a daycare for 10th Avenue Church.
Wow.
And we've had a number of celebrations.
Yes.
She did an amazing job with that daycare and leaves a great legacy. And I'm just so proud of her, the way she passed the baton to the new director. And now she's finding her way. There's plenty to do with grandkids, with her mother. And of course, I'm a handful. She's got to work with that.
She's got to look after you, keep you in line. What does that mean for you as you think about a new chapter? I mean, how long have you been married now?
We're coming up 52 years.
Coming to 52. Congratulations. That's an amazing thing. And there's obviously there's chapters, there's seasons in marriage.
Yes.
This is in some ways, a new chapter. What's sort of on your heart as you think about this chapter for your guys' marriage together and home together and ministry together?
Oh, very good. Well, we'd like to do more together. So she was able to go with me on a trip to Nashville, and will be going with me on a trip to Nova Scotia. And you and I were talking about different retreats,
yes.
And I'm going to see if she can come and be part of that.
I think people are just trying to get Sharon out, and so they invite you, but they're just trying to get Sharon.
I get it. Yeah, I could see who the real the real star is.
The real pull, the real attraction.
Well, I just see her blossoming. And the gifts that I've always seen in her that she can now be able to express more widely than with children. That's not I'm not minimize that at all, but her administrative skills, her capacity to listen, she's very wise. I think she would be an outstanding spiritual director. So we'll find our way on that.
Yeah.
But see, we moved to this smaller condo, I think you know about, where independent seniors living. Virtually, I've been the one living in that house most of the day. So it's like I'm welcoming her back into my home. So learning how to adjust to the fact that I had all these hours of quiet and could move from room to room, and now I share it again.
Yes.
It almost feels like at the beginning of marriage, where you have to learn how to live together in the same house.
Totally.
It's fun.
Oh, what a blessing. I know that I speak for a lot of people when I say this, that one of the reasons why I'm so drawn to you and many others is because you represent going the distance in ministry. I know you'd be the first to admit lots of mistakes, lots of trip ups, self-doubt, and all the stuff. But not just in ministry, but in marriage and ministry. And so I just really honor you and Sharon.
Thank you.
And the example of your marriage together. I look up to it. I know Rach and I do a lot and enjoy friendship with both of you. I'm really grateful for that.
Thank you. Our joy.
One thing I also know about you is that you spend a lot of time with pastors on Zoom, on the phone, in person, at least a few meetings every week. And on top of that, correspondence. And that might be an understatement. And those are friendships that you've cultivated over the years. And some new friendships, young pastors who are reaching out for all sorts of reasons. And I just thought it'd be interesting just to have you reflect a little bit of what are the questions? What are the concerns, or what are the themes that you're hearing come up the most in these conversations? If there are any themes at all that you can draw out.
Oh boy, there are so many different themes and different people. It depends upon whether you're in Canada, the United States, or Singapore, or UK. There are going to be different issues. I think that one of the biggest ones is, what does pastoring now look like? How do we do this? It's very different than when I started. And we could talk about that sometime. So trying to help carve out a new understanding of pastoring in those different contexts. Related to that is, can I do it? Can I really give myself to this. And interesting for a number of pastors saying, you know, I have plan B in mind. I've got another kind of business I'd like to run.
You feel like that's changed? Like when you were maybe in seminary or preparing or starting out in pastoral ministry, do you feel like there's that same, I don't even know if it's fair to call it hedging. I don't think that's necessarily what it is, but yeah, any reflections? Like, is that something that's changed?
I think it has changed. Yeah, the friends I would walk with over the years since we left seminary, I started seminary in 1969. No, it was a lifelong vocation. But that was also because it was relatively clear what the role was, both in terms of relating to the church and then relating to the culture.
Right.
When I started out, to be a clergy person was a quite a distinctive role, even in the world.
Yeah.
You used to get privileges when you went to the store. If you mentioned you were a pastor, you automatically 15% off.
I'm not getting any discounts in Vancouver. I think I pay extra, actually, for being a pastor here.
It just might be. You guys are causing too much trouble. You got to pay an extra 15% surcharge. So it was different. And so I don't remember. Now, we were saying, oh, man, I am so tired. How can I keep going? Versus, I don't know that I want to keep going. Or now I hear that a little bit more. Is this not the question is this worth it? But how can I do it?
Yeah.
And that's a function of a lot of things. A lot of it's financial in our part of the world.
For sure.
Can I do this to my family? Do I need to take on a second job? And if I have to take on a second job, shouldn't I just do that and be a lay pastor? So the longevity. How do we preach in our time? Yeah. And that was clear when I started out. There were models of homiletics and how you did it. And now it's so different, and that's due to the changes in culture. Yeah. How do I stay close to the Lord? How do I nurture that intimacy with Him when I've got so much on my plate? Talking with pastors from the States, which is different than Canada, there's a real apprehension about the next months as they move into the election cycle around the president. I bet. And in talking with a few in the last few weeks, there's actual fear. Some pastors, just having parishioners leave because they won't declare what candidate they're for. Right. And I can understand if you're advocating one candidate and people go, no, I'm out of here, but they won't do either. Right. And now they're in trouble. Like, wait a minute, what's this? So a lot of apprehension of how do I navigate this very different, complex, volatile, frightening scenario that we're moving into. So those kinds of things. Yeah, I really appreciate you taking time to reflect on that. Maybe we can lean into a couple of them. All right. I love talking about preaching with you. Yeah. We love talking about preaching. What's on your heart for preachers today? Like, I don't know if it's tips or advice or just a reflection on what do you think's most essential for us to be thinking about in our time as preachers? Okay. Well, I do have some tips. Yeah, take us there. I wrote down some notes. Perfect. But I'll say the most essential thing would be before the tips. So I guess it's just another tip, but let's make it that, is learning to trust the inherent authority/power of the Word. The Word of God makes things happen. Your word, my word, makes things happen. Words make things happen. Yeah. But the Word, the living Word, always makes things happen. And I would want to encourage every preacher, no matter how the sermon in your mind worked or didn't work, if it was grounded in, emerged from, pushed back into the Word, it bore fruit. You may not see it right then, but so how then do we stand on that? And I think the visualization helps on that, and that is that even if you've got your text behind you on a screen, which I have no qualms about, and you've had people turn to their iPhone to look at their text, just holding this. And holding it open. I know that's a value for you. It does something for me. Yeah. I have a reverence for this word, and I trust that that Jesus emerges from it. But just holding that as a way to say, Lord, under our breath, Lord, this is where I take my stand in your word that goes forth and it does not return empty. So that confidence that no matter what cultural context we're in, no matter what political context we're in, no matter how we're doing emotionally and physically, this bears fruit somehow, somewhere in that context, even if I haven't done a good job. So that'd be the first thing.
Amen. Amen.
Second, I've been thinking a lot about the verbs of
What
preaching.
do you mean by verbs?
So in the book I wrote on preaching, I'm not selling the book, The Glory of Preaching, but
find that at amazon.ca.com.
You can.
Google search Darrell Johnson, The Glory of Preaching.
Bless your heart. And it's now come out in Chinese.
That's very cool.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that.
Very cool.
But there are different words that are used for the for the conveying and communication of the word. You've got heralding.
Yeah.
Hear ye, kind of the John the Baptist approach. You've got evangelizing. I've got good news for you. You've got prophetic, thus says the Lord. You've got teaching. This is what it means. You've got confession. I take my stand with the church on this doctrine or this moral position. And then you have witnessing, which is a dominant word throughout the book of Acts. And it's interesting that John, the Apostle John, in his latter years, and I'm not in my latter years, 75, but he's probably over 80, comes back to this word witness. Read 1 John. At the end of John, his witness is true. What we've seen with our eyes, what we've heard with our ears, what we've touched with our hands, we proclaim to you.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that is going to need to be the posture right now. I don't know that in a Sunday morning you can argue for the truth. Some people are uniquely gifted at that. We work with someone who's really good, and you're good at it. But this is what I've experienced. This is what's been true in my life. And I haven't done a lot of that in my preaching in the past, but I'm thinking it's needed now. People need to hear that it worked for you as the communicator. So
tell me a bit more. So bridge that between, the first point, standing firmly in the word. And so, because as I hear you talk about witnessing, I know that you're not talking about like a subjective opinion about things, but you are talking about a subjective experience of this objective reality. Yes. Can you tease it out a bit more?
So a sermon would embody this. What I'm saying comes from this authoritative word.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily put it that way, but people know you're speaking that word, and so you're bearing witness to this word in that sense. But somewhere along the line, say, "But I found it to be true."
Yeah.
Whereas once I was blind, now I see. So somewhere along the way, I think people need to hear that it works. And that doesn't have to take a lot part of the sermon. I think it just becomes an automatic posture. I'm going to witness to the fact that this really is good news.
Yeah.
That he is as good as he says he is.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm meaning by witness. Also, I guess because our culture is not going to necessarily buy into the authority of the word.
Yeah, maybe not on the first go.
No, but they will listen. I think people listen to someone who's authentic, warm, engaging, and who says, no, this worked. It really worked for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. I feel like that kind of, I think about two cultural reference points that maybe is coming out of, like, one is obviously in the postmodern era, which we've been living in for a while, there's a higher view on the personal experience than the meta-narrative.
Yeah.
Though I do sense a deep hunger for people to find themselves in a broader story.
Yes.
But there is sort of a value of individual story and experience. And then I've also understand that, particularly with Gen Z, the question isn't so much, is it true? Although that's still important. The primary question is it good and beautiful? Because once upon a time, you think, after the new atheists, it was defense for the resurrection, defense. Is this true? Because square up with faith and science is square up. And while those questions still remain, they're not the primary. The primary is this good for the world? Is this beautiful? And I think part of the job of the preacher today, I'd love to hear your reflection, is to show how beautiful Jesus is.
Very good.
How beautiful the kingdom of God is. And that to me is that witness stuff. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, I think, see if you agree with this, I think that people listening to us communicate, they can see it in our eyes, on our face, in the tone.
Do you believe this? Or have you let it rest on your life?
That's right. And so for the communicator, for the preacher to be caught up in the wonder of who Jesus is and the wonder of what he's done. Well, look at my face now, just as I say that.
It's a choice, though, hey, to like be present in the moment enough to and tender to what you're talking about enough to let it affect you again.
Absolutely.
Which is a unique task when you've crafted words or you've prepared the talk, but to be present to the people, present to the Spirit, and slow down enough to let it create wonder in your heart again.
I wonder if that isn't a way to pray on Sunday mornings. Lord, please engender the wonder even as I preach. Preach these words to me so that I radiate the joy of knowing how beautiful you are.
I know you recently got to preach to a group of pastors in Nashville. You were at Belonging Co. and they did, if I understand right, a pre-gathering for a number of pastors. Can you give us a little bit of like the trailer or the Coles notes of that message?
Well, I chose, and I think I told you before I went, I chose to do, I felt led to do John 15, abide in me and I in you. And I set that up as this is our number one job. You would think that our number one job is love or proclaim or serve, but no, I argue that's not our number one job because you can't do those until you do the number one job, which is abide in me and I in you. So I unpacked that. I had 3 questions that I built it around, but I kept reiterating the preposition in. Others have heard me say there the 2 best words in the New Testament are Jesus and in. And I learned afterwards, I couldn't see everybody because it was a big group of people and the lights are down. You know how that works, but the lights are on the speaker, and so I couldn't see everybody's faces. But I learned afterwards that a number of people were in tears within the first minute.
Wow!
When all I did was kept saying in. He's in you. You're in him.
Wow!
And I could feel in the room this sense of, okay, mission accomplished. I can sit down. But I went on for another 35 minutes.
Right. You finished the exposition.
So what I thought was going to be too simple.
Yeah. I remember you said that before you went. You were like, I just wonder if this is too simple. And I rebuked you and told you. No, I'm just kidding. I didn't.
Well, you did. You encouraged me.
Yeah.
But I was concerned that it would be written off as too pious and too simplistic in that sense.
Yeah.
But it turned out that, again, the word bore fruit. The word itself, I didn't do a whole lot of fancy stuff with, although people said they couldn't keep up with the notes. But I thought I was afraid it would be simplistic.
Yeah.
I don't mind simple.
Yeah.
But it turned out to be deep and gripping.
What a gift.
I was really very thankful. So that was a clue of what people are looking for. How do I just live this simplicity of the faith, of the relationship with Jesus?
I think it's also because of, I wonder, if it feels like some of the secondary issues are so contentious right now that we live in it as pastors. Like we're just, how do I communicate it? How do I'm forced to wrestle through your own conviction with more nuance than ever? And there's an exhaustion of living in those important issues, deeply important, obviously important to culture, obviously important to our faith. But they're not the most essential things. And there's just something so restful about coming back to the main things.
The main thing.
Because it's so exhausting trying to weigh out all those secondary things. Yes. Not to say they're not important, but it's exhausting.
It's exhausting. So we've got to move back to that place of refreshment. So, mission accomplished. It worked.
Any other thoughts on preaching before we move on to maybe a different
couple
thought?
of others, just that I've been thinking about
there.
a lot, and I would like to even think more about it, so I'll just make it brief. I think I'd want to encourage pastors to think of their sermons in the context of the liturgy of the whole service. So there's a tendency for the communicator to think that this is isolated.
Yeah.
And it's not.
Yeah.
So you're working with a team who are leading depends on the liturgical structure, but most churches now, it's a music set, and then some visiting, and then that's a sermon and a music set.
Yeah.
So we're looking at the music. But to realize that if those songs are chosen carefully, and thankfully we have folks that are doing that for us, people's minds and hearts are already set to hear the word.
Yeah.
Therefore, I would like to lift off the shoulders of preachers, feeling like they've got to have this long introduction by way of warming people up, awakening them to the truth, and connecting them to the word. That's happening in the liturgy. So you can just get right to it. And so if I'm preaching somewhere that I don't know the people, I'll ask for the music ahead of time. But if I don't, I'm listening really carefully and watching. And I may then latch on to something we sang that will lead us to the sermon. And that's all I need to make the connection. Now, if I'm speaking at a non-liturgical event, I might need to do some more warm-up with the audience.
Yeah.
But you don't need to on Sunday morning. You can get to it faster than we think. So I'd want to encourage on that.
That's really encouraging. I think that's it works on the other end of the message as well. Like,
that's right.
You know, there's always, how do I land the plane? I think that was, again, obviously a deeply important question. But there is something about leaning on the team, trusting the Spirit, organizing the hearts and minds of others, and that's really special to hear.
Well, I want to lift that burden off.
Yeah.
Because I've carried that burden myself, and I think the Lord is saying, no, you don't need to in that context.
It's almost like you don't have to do all of the things.
No, you don't. You've been set up. Yeah. Step into the place. Just do their thing. It's related to another tip then. I think that an introduction to a sermon in a seeker context can also be very simple. It can be something like this. As Christians, we gather on the Lord's Day, and as Christians, we are people of the book. And each time that we gather, we open to another section of the book, and it's my job to explain what we're going to read. So this morning, I'm going to invite you into page 95 or whatever, a section of the book called Psalms. Yeah. And there are 150 of them, and the one I want us to look at today is number 92. And I invite you to come with me into this. I don't think you have to say a whole lot more. Yeah. Because the visitor knows this is a different kind of experience. We don't have to apologize at all. They want to know, what did I get into? Well, we're people of the book. We open the book. Yeah. And then related to that, I think the tone, and we've kind of already said this, the tone of the sermon could be, I'm going to tell you about my best friend. Now, you could even say that in a super seeker context. If I invite you to give attention for the next X number of minutes, I'm going to tell you about the best friend I've ever found. And then go.
That's beautiful.
So you can see what I'm wrestling with. I'm trying to lift off the shoulders of preachers. You've got to make all that happen. Yeah. No, we don't. Yeah. It's simpler than we realized. So,
are you enjoying preaching today as much as you always have?
Yes. The hesitation was lately the weariness has gotten to me a little bit more. Yeah. That probably just age or doing too much or something else. But yes. Well, you see what happens. Even on a weary time, I get up there, and about the first page of my notes, I've got about a 1 minute. Each page is about 1 minute. Yeah. By the time I'm through that, man, I'm cooking.
You're in it.
And and I will sit down and trust that it's worked. But I'll sit down in the seat next to Sharon, and I'll say I did what I was born to do, and I get to do it at 75.
So good.
I'm a very, very fortunate man.
So good. I've got here, if you're listening, you can't see it, but you can hear the pages. But if you're watching on YouTube or whatever, you can see it. This is your newest book, That You May Live, How the 10 Commandments Lead to Human Freedom. And this just came out. And as I understand it, this is based off of your journey of teaching the 10 Commandments in local congregations and then taking that work over many years, refining it into something that's both a resource for preachers, but also a resource for anyone who wants to understand the deeper heart or the story that the 10 Commandments finds itself in, what it means for us as followers of Jesus today. And we're in the middle of preaching the 10 Commandments at our church. And so I've been reading this in preparation for even the speaking I'm doing, and just have so enjoyed it. And so first of all, thank you for this work, and I commend it to everybody listening. I'd just love to hear a little bit about your journey, even this title, That You May Live. Tell me where that came from and how that connects to the 10 Commandments.
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank the team at CCLN. They did a great job on this. We've kind of talked about doing this book for a while, but then because The Way is doing a series on that, they kick-started and worked all summer to get that out. And I'm very, very grateful of how hard they worked.
Yeah.
So I wanted
a lot of people.
Say thank you.
And Ariel Ratzlaff, who's been designing your books, did just an amazing job. And it's just so nice to hold something that feels beautiful. There's some great symbolism in the design, and it's compelling.
She's amazing.
Yeah, she's done a great job, so it's fun to honor her and appreciate her work on that.
Very good.
So the title, That You May Live.
That You May Live. All right. In the past, I've used different titles of the potential book. And Dan Rowe of our team was reading through the manuscript, and he saw that in addition to Exodus 20 on the God speaking the law, I worked with Deuteronomy, where the second telling of the law, where Moses quotes God, I'm telling you this, that you may live, that it may go well with you, that you may live.
Yeah.
And there's so many times in Deuteronomy when he says that. So Dan and I are talking about this, and he goes, what if we called the book That You May Live? So I give credit to Dan for naming that.
Daniel Rowe. So good.
So I was working with 10 words that make us alive.
Yeah.
Other kinds of phrases like that. They were kind of chunky.
Yeah.
And he says, let's just say that you may live. And that is why God, Yahweh, speaks the commandments. Not to stifle our life, not to box us in, not to make us feel miserable that we're not living, but here's a way to live. Now, I have had this in my files for some time because I've taught it in different places and did a class at Regent College on it. But it turns out, and I've wondered whether it should have been in a book form along the way. I felt like the Lord would want it someday, maybe even after I was gone. But it was because of where we are culturally that I thought, you know what, this is the right moment. So all the work was for right now.
Cool.
Because, as you know, in particular in Canada, among young people, people are asking for some kind of rubric, some kind of set of rules that can help me make sense of life. So I think people are more open to receiving the fact that God has actually heard our cry and given us, I want to say a blueprint, but kind of the manufacturer's specifications on how the human species works. So I'm pleased. It seems to be the right time.
You know, I find really compelling about the themes and title is like what you mentioned, this idea that like when we think commands, we often think control, restriction. But it's like, I think if we could have a new Pavlovian response to the 10 Commandments, it would be life, liberty, freedom.
That's right.
You know, and this is from the book, but you describe just the first thing is it's like God's covenant relationship. I'm your God who brought you out of slavery and bringing them into liberation, into new life, into freedom. So all that follows is a description of what that free life looks like. And then I love how that idea of like, think about Jesus saying, I've come that you may have life, that you may live fully.
Yeah.
And one thing I enjoyed hearing you teach about in the opening of the series was that Jesus fully embodies this picture. Like this is a portrait, a picture that points us to Jesus.
Because he's actually finally the lawgiver, so he is the one who is revealing himself as he speaks the commands. They're not just a picture of a God who's going, well, these folks could use some rules to live by. Let's see. what should they be?
Yeah.
No, they emerge out of God's character, out of Jesus' character, who is the giver of the law in our flesh.
So good.
Who not only preaches this, but lives it. In fact, he can preach it because he lives it. So if we read the law Christologically, it's very redemptive. And that's why in the opening chapter, I argue that by the end, these are no longer commandments, they're promises.
Okay, tell me more about that, because I was going to bring that up. I found that to be such a compelling thought that I think, I don't want to misquote you, that one day we will, as followers of Christ, I think if I hear you right, in the new heavens, new earth, we won't struggle to obey this. We will. Tell me more.
In fact, even before that one day, I think we'll be able to say that. Yeah, there's biblical and theological reasons for saying the commands become promises. The biggest one is what God speaks comes into being. Back to the power of the Word, the performative power of the Word. God not only speaks to inform, but to perform, make things happen. So when he gives a commandment, ultimately it's a promise. It's going to be. And then given his desire that you may live, he is going to bring all of this into being so that we actually are alive. So one day, there will be nothing between me and God, between you and God. Can you imagine that? There'll be nothing between us.
And you're referring to the first command. No gods between us before me.
Won't be anything between us. Second command. One day, you won't need to imagine me at all.
Wow.
Because you will have come to know my own image in Jesus so well. You know me.
Yeah.
You don't have to do any imagining anymore. And imagining who God is gets us into trouble. We always imagine that out of our trauma and pain and other things. One day, you will not take my name in vain. I've given you my name that you may call upon me, and you'll pray your heart out, and on it goes. One day you will not commit adultery. You will know what faithfulness is.
Yeah.
You will not need to desire somebody else, etc. And the one I love, then, of course, the 10th commandment, one day you will not covet, because you will be so satisfied in me, you won't covet anything. You'll just be so content in a relationship with me. Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
So that's why then 10 commandments are still relevant for us.
Well, it's really special teaching this series with you and the team, with Chris and Elita and Jeremy and others. And I just really sense, you said this, that people are longing for a pathway. And even just something that feels like clarity in the midst of the mud, the fogginess. And it's really special to watch what the Spirit of God does as this is being proclaimed. There's just it's been really sweet. I don't know if you've just experienced it both as you've been preaching it, but also in and amongst the congregation. It's just been a really special.
It's very special. Yeah, you remember when I started the series. It's not. I don't say this in the book, but in the series, I'm feeling a little bit nervous about this. Doing this series in a context of autonomy and antinomianism. Boy, the receptivity in the sanctuary is really sweet. Do you sense that when you've preached?
Absolutely, and we still got a couple big hitters. We got adultery coming up and Sabbath this week.
I was working on that yesterday. Oh man, I can't believe I'm going to do adultery. Anyway,
I think I do think it'll be the same experience. I think there's a hunger for truth. Yeah, something that works. Yeah, that transcends and is anchored to something beyond just our fleeting moment. Yeah. Any thoughts before we move along on preaching the 10 Commandments? Like, just as you've been, some people, I was chatting with a pastor yesterday from Alberta who's, they're teaching the 10 Commandments right now. So,
oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. They're 1 week behind us conveniently. So he says, I said, are you reading Darrell's book? He said, yeah, it's helpful. But yeah, any thoughts or reflections on, on what it means to preach the 10 Commandments today?
I think we want to avoid two things. You want to avoid hopeless idealism on the one hand and oppressive legalism on the other hand. And we do that by reminding ourselves of the first line of the law, which you already quoted, I am Yahweh your God. The relationship's been established.
Yeah.
It's a done deal.
Yeah.
We're in covenant. So keeping this is not going to be unto establishing a covenant. And I'm the one who sets you free from the land of bondage. I've already acted to save you. So this is not going to be the way to get saved. This is the way to live saved. This is the way to live in a relationship with me. And I think that keeps us from a hopeless idealism.
Yeah.
How am I going to live up to that? Well, I don't need to live up to that in that kind of earning sense.
Yes.
And it's not the suppressive legalism. God has not put that on our shoulders in order to get somewhere. So I think that's what I would encourage preachers. Keep coming back to that. This is about a relationship. Earl Palmer, one of my mentors, put it this way. I think that must have been 52 years ago when Sharon and I went to a conference together before we were married up in Forest Home out of Los Angeles. A relationship already established, a freedom already won. And if we can live in that space, then I think we can keep the law. We'll want to keep the law.
Yeah.
We'll be able to keep the law.
Do I understand right that Earl Palmer recently passed away?
Yes.
Yeah. And you shared with me that I hope this is appropriate to bring up, that you've experienced almost, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like the loneliness or just some of the sorrow of seeing a lot of your mentors, fathers in the faith, pass on to glory, and how that's felt for you in your age and stage.
Yeah, 3 mentors, 2 that I actually knew in person, 1 I did not know in person, passed away in this last year. Yeah. So with your first question, what was the year about it? Yeah. I guess I could have started there. So Earl Palmer, who took me under wing as I was a young seminarian. He was Presbyterian pastor. At the time, he was at Berkeley Press and then went to Seattle, the University Presbyterian Seattle. Was pastor of Union Church of Manila years before.
Before you pastored there?
Yes, and that's why I ended up there. So he advocated me there. He also advocated me to come to Regent. So he's very direct role in my life in terms of movements. But he's the one that gave me a love for expository preaching. Just a winsome expositor. And you walk away understanding the text. You understand why he quoted C.S. Lewis's Chronicles of Narnia out of that particular text. Yeah. It wasn't just an add-on. So it was a great encourager. And then Daniel Fuller, the son of Charles Fuller, founder of Fuller Seminary, passed away just a few months ago. And he's the one who taught me how to read the Bible. I owe to him my ability to read the text clearly. He just drove into us. I can feel him on my shoulder Saturday night when I go to bed. Do you have the main point of the text? And can you account for everything else in the text in light of that main point? And just deeply rooted that in us with all of his gentleness. So, with both of those guys, I lost my father years ago. I felt the same level of sorrow, losing the joy that they're both with the Lord, about the same age too. I felt that. And then Tim Keller. Yeah, I never got to meet him. We went to New York one time and hope to do so, but listening to his podcast, listening to his sermon, reading his books, such help understanding where we are culturally. But the 2 I knew that I miss, it's made me think of them. It made me think of a lot of things, but I'll leave it at that.
Well, you're that role for a lot of people, for a lot of people, a mentor from a distance, to the degree that you can be from a distance. But as you mentioned with Tim Keller, like deeply impactful to so many, a lot of people listening right now, and then a lot of people up close, more than I think anyone knows, really. Yeah. And I'm just grateful for your willingness to give away your life and provide covering for some of us younger, trying to take a swing at this stuff. Very grateful. Very grateful.
You're more than trying to take a swing. You swing very well. You hit home runs regularly.
Well, it's a real joy to take time to chat today about the 10 Commandments, about preaching, about pastoring. Come again to the podcast.
Okay.
I'll just bring a recording along for the rest of the next time we go for a walk or something, and we'll just see if it makes for a podcast.
You're great.
See how it goes.
Oh.
Maybe one thing as we end. Recently when we were hanging out, you mentioned Psalm 46 and what it was doing on your heart.
Oh, yeah.
Cease striving. Know that I'm God. And I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but I know that that was working on your heart and felt like something that God was, breathing on in a fresh way in you and for others. And just maybe you can, as whether it's like a benediction or a prayer or just a last reflection, we can end there.
Okay. Well, Psalm 46 begins with, do not fear, though everything around you should change. And that's what we're going through.
Yeah.
And we could do a whole podcast on that. We need Mark Sayers to really make this clear for us.
He'd help know just how much is changing.
Yeah, how much is changing.
How complex it really
is. It's just all changing all around us.
Yeah.
On that note, I would say one of the things I want to say about the present context that I think can be helpful is we are back to the place where the first preachers of the gospel were living. They had no political support, and they had no cultural support. The culture did not endorse the agenda, and the political realm did not either. Well, the political realm was starting to get threatened with this whole thing of Jesus is king. So we're back to that context. But anyway, right now, we're still going through this huge change. Therefore, do not fear. Why? There's a river that runs through the city of God. It doesn't run dry. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our stronghold. And then that line in verse 10, cease striving, know that I am God. And then this is the line that we talked about. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. And what grips me about that is he is in charge of his own glory. He's the one that is going to make sure that people know him and know who he is, and we get to participate in that, but it's not on our shoulders. I don't have to make it happen.
It's a good word.
So I guess we could translate to Hebrew, chill out.
Is that the technical Hebrew?
I don't think so, but let go works.
Yeah.
So I would want for all who are listening to realize that, we participate in something that we don't carry. And how to live lightly, graciously, recognizing that in the midst of it all, the living triune God of grace has got it and will be all he is to the world.